This is Margaret Murdin, who is the person responsible for me being a trustee. She's a past president. She's NDB and a Master Beekeeper, and she's absolutely inspirational. And I asked her to do this lecture because I think it's such a useful one for beekeepers to have, because it's interesting from a non-beekeeping perspective, but it explains some of the very special things about honeybee genetics. So over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, folks. And thank you to Diane. Diane is our vice chair of the BBKA. And I'm very glad I persuaded Diane to stand. She is a fantastic trustee. And she's amazing with IT and technology. Without her, I couldn't do any of this. I tell you, she gets me started on the technology. But don't take any notes, folks, because I have written this lecture up as a handout. It's just written up, and I will send it. Anybody that's registered for this will get an email with an attachment from either Diane or somebody else. Okay, or the office will send it out. I see Lee's just signed in, but I've done a handout, and you'll get it. So you don't worry. I mean, there's a lot of terms in this, a lot of complicated terminology. So just try and understand it. You'll get it all on the handout. Okay, so it's genetics made simple. Let's start at the beginning. A gene carries all the genetic material in every organism, apart from things like bacteria and viruses. Anything that's multicellular has got genetic material. Those genes are carried on your chromosomes, and those chromosomes are in every cell in your body. And all a chromosome is a long string of genes. Some are longer than others. Some carry thousands of genes. Some carry very few. And that's what they look like. I think it was in the 60s, they discovered that it was chromosomes were a double helix, and they got the Nobel Prize for it. So chromosomes will carry thousands of genes, okay? And they are in every cell, in every living organism, apart from things like bacteria and viruses. And they occur in matched pairs. Every chromosome has got a match. You get one of your chromosomes from your mother and one from your father. And that is the same in most organisms, but not all. And honeybees are different. Honeybees are one of the not all. So every cell in your body has got matched pairs of chromosomes. You got one set from your mother and one set from your father, which is why we tend to look a little bit like our mum and a little bit like our dad, because we've got them half each about. And those genes determine all your characteristics and your attributes, whether you're bad-tempered, whether you're a nice person, whether you're tall, whether you're dark-skinned, black-haired, blonde, whatever. Everything is determined by those genes, that genetic material. Now, here's some of our definitions. A pair of genes for a particular characteristic, like, for example, eye color, are called an allelomorphic pair, which we shorten, we say a pair of alleles. So, eye color. Let's say there was only two possibilities, blue eyes and brown eyes. A pair of genes would be responsible for the color of your eyes, and we'd say that's an allelomorphic pair, or that's a pair of alleles. But sometimes where a group of alleles is responsible for a characteristic, we call it an allelomorphic series, or a series of alleles. Now, most of your characteristics, most of all of our characteristics, are determined by a series of alleles. For example, skin color. Skin color can be anything from very, very light to very, very dark. Everything in between, because there's a whole series of genes determining skin color. Same with hair color. And if you think about it, it has to be like that. Think about tallness. Some people are not very tall. I'm not very tall. Some people are very tall. And there's a series of alleles responsible for tallness, which is why we can be anything in between 7 foot or whatever, 5 foot, anything in between, because it's a series of alleles responsible for it. So most of our characteristics are determined by more than one pair of genes. And that's important, and it'll be important later on. So most of them are determined by more than one pair of genes, like height. There's a spectrum of heights, not just tall and not just short, but any in between. And in honeybees, you've got characteristics like docility that are determined by more than one set of genes, like hygienic behavior that a lot of people are interested in at the moment, or the accuracy of the dancing. Some bees are very, very accurate when they dance, and some not so much, because there's a whole series of alleles determining dance accuracy and hygienic behavior and docility, which is why it's very difficult to breed for docility, very difficult to breed for hygienic bees, because there's more than one set of genes responsible for that behavior. So genes can be for the same characteristic, but can demonstrate that characteristic in different ways. For example, sometimes one gene of the pair will override the other one. One is more important than the other, and we say one is dominant and the other one is recessive. I don't know whether you can see that. It's blanked out on my screen with my name. I don't know why. So one gene is dominant, and you will get dominant genes and you will get recessive genes. And some of the genetic conditions that are very, very serious medically are because the mum unknowingly is carrying a recessive gene and the dad unknowingly is carrying the recessive gene. They get together and bang, they've got a baby with some sort of genetic disorder that they didn't know about. It didn't show in them because they are carrying the dominant gene, which masked it. But if the baby gets the two recessives, then it'll have the genetic disorder. So to demonstrate all this, let's take the genes for eye color. And for the sake of this argument, I'm going to say that eye color is determined by two genes only. It's not, it's determined by a whole series of alleles. But for the sake of this, we're going to pretend there's two alleles for eye color. You've got one gene from eye color from your mother and one gene from your father. In the main, generally speaking, genes for darkness are dominant over genes for lightness. So it's the same with hair color. It's the same with skin color. Normally, it's the same with dark bees. Darkness is usually dominant over lightness. So this person's got brown eyes. They've got dark eyes. Let's say you get a gene for blue eyes from your mother, as in fact I did, and a gene for brown eyes from your father, which is what I did. You'll have brown eyes because the dark gene for brown eyes is dominant over the blue gene. You're carrying the blue gene, but you'll never know. Well, you might. We'll come on to it later. I am carrying a gene for blue eyes because my mother had blue eyes, even though I've got brown eyes. You'll have brown eyes because the gene for brown eyes is dominant over the gene for blue eyes. Now, brown eyes is the expression of your genes. I have got brown eyes. The expression of my genes is brown eyes, and we call it the phenotype. How your gene is expressed, whether you've got black hair, blue eyes, brown eyes, whether you're tall, what you look like, whether you're bad-tempered, whether you're shy, talkative, that is your phenotype. That is the way that your genes are showing. Don't need to write it down. The definition's in the handout. So your genetic makeup, or my genetic makeup, is one gene for blue eyes and one gene for brown eyes. The gene for blue eyes is masked by the gene for brown eyes because the dark gene is dominant. The gene for blue eyes is a recessive. And I bet you're all having a look or a wonder at what color your eyes are. If you have got blue eyes, you haven't got a dominant gene for brown eyes. If you have got blue eyes, you have got two recessive genes. Both of them will be for blue eyes. Now, there's a convention. Dominant genes are always written with capital letters. Recessive genes are always written with lowercase letters. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So if it's got a capital letter, it's a dominant gene. If it's a recessive, it's got a lowercase letter. So I write the gene for brown eyes as capital B. I write the gene for blue eyes as lowercase b. Your genes for eye colour, or my genes for eye colour, in fact, are written capital B, small b. I have got brown eyes. That capital B, small b is my genotype. It's what my genes are. And it's different from my phenotype. My phenotype is brown eyes. My genotype is one gene for blue eyes, a recessive, written small case, and one gene for brown eyes, dominant gene, capital letter. So your eye color, your genotype is capital B, small b. Your phenotype is brown eyes. If you've got small case b and small case b, you've got blue eyes. You have to have the two recessives, because if there was a capital B in there, a gene for brown eyes, that person would have brown eyes. Capital B, small b, that's the genotype. It will give you a phenotype of brown eyes. Also, two dominants, two capital Bs, two dominant genes for eyes will also give you brown eyes. And if you've got brown eyes, you won't know which you are unless you have children. We'll come on to that in a minute. Genotypes are different. The phenotype for the top person is blue eyes. The phenotypes for the other two are the same, brown eyes. But for the two brown-eyed people, the genotype is different. So let's give an example. You've got brown eyes like I have, capital B, small b. And I go out and I get a partner. We've both got brown eyes. I've got brown eyes. My husband had brown eyes. This is perfectly true. Brown eyes. We didn't know until we had a girl. My daughter has got blue eyes. And I thought, hang on a minute, how did that happen? I've got brown eyes. My husband's got brown eyes. How could she have blue eyes? Until I looked into it and realized my mother had blue eyes. If my mother had blue eyes, she has to have two recessives, a small b and another small b. She can't pass anything on to me except a small b. So I know I am carrying a recessive gene for blue eyes. My husband was the same. He's a very dark eyes. Until I investigated it and I found his brother had blue eyes. So he is carrying a recessive gene for blue eyes. So I've got a daughter with blue eyes, and I know that her genotype is two recessives, two lowercase. Because if she had a dominant, a brown eye gene, she'd have brown eyes. My son has got brown eyes. So my children can either be blue-eyed, two recessives, or brown eyes, one recessive and one dominant, or two dominants. Now I know what the genotype is for my children. I know my daughter has got two recessives because she's got blue eyes. She has to have. I know my son is got one dominant and one recessive. How do I know this? Because he's got a blue-eyed son. So he must have the blue-eyed gene. If he had two dominants, he would have passed a dominant onto his son, and his son would have dark eyes. So now it gets more complicated because scientists are a pain in the neck. Scientists only count one of each matched pair, and they call it the genome. I think the genome for the honeybee was unraveled in about 2002, but don't hold me to it. I think it was 2002. It's called the genome. When they say they've analysed the genome, it means that they know what's in all your chromosomes. And that number of chromosomes that you've got is designated with the letter N, always. And remember, it's only counting one of the pair. And in humans, in every one of us, N is 23. So we've got 23 chromosomes for all our characteristics, every attribute, and every one of those 23 chromosomes has a match, has a pair. So we've got actually 2 lots of 23 chromosomes. 1 lot from your mother, 1 lot from your father. So we are said to have 2N, or 46 chromosomes, in every cell in our body. All of us, every cell has got 46 chromosomes. 23 from your mother, 23 from your father, 2N. But your genome number is 23. Now in honeybees, it's your genome number is 16. N is 16, not 23. And every female honeybee, the queen, and all the workers have got 2N, 32 chromosomes, 16 from the drone and 16 from the queen. A fertilized egg gives a female 2N, 16 from the drone, 16 from the queen. Now, everybody that's listening to me tonight, and all the worker honeybees and the queen are all diploid. An organism, any organism that has that matching pair of chromosomes, 1 lot from the mother, 1 lot from the father, is diploid. That's 2 lots. Diploid is double. And that's the way to remember it. Diploid is double the number. 1 lot from the queen, 1 lot from the drone. And that's important for later on in this talk, but you don't need to write it down. All female honeybees and everybody listening to me is diploid. 2 sets. But, it's a big but. Male honeybees have no father. Drones are from unfertilized eggs. They haven't got a dad. Now, I can't get my head around that. I can't get my head around how a queen can lay an unfertilized egg and it's male. But never mind, that's the case. They only have 1 set of chromosomes because they haven't got a father, so they don't get the matching pair. They only have N. They have 1 set. They don't get the matching set. They have N and not 2N. They're not diploid. They haven't got the double. They've only got the 1 set from their mother. Beats me how they can be so big as well, but never mind. They're haploid. And the way to remember it is diploid is double, haploid is half. They've got half the number. Diane, is that a good place to stop and take questions, or shall I carry on?
No, we've got a couple of questions at this point. That would be good. Is the dominant recessive relationship just been between pairs of alleles or for a multiple allele sequence? Is it dominance ordered in a fixed sequence?
It's if you've got a series of alleles, for example, for tallness, then the dominant ones will show. You will be tall. Even if you've got 1 or 2 genes for very shortness, tallness will show. And it's interesting, the tallest people in Europe are from the Netherlands. Dutch people are the tallest. Because within their within the people in the Netherlands, and most people marry within their group, most Dutch people marry other Dutch people, they are the tallest because within that group, they're all carrying dominant genes for tallness. And it's also if you've got dark skin color. If you've got black skin, it's dominant over light skin. But it's a whole series of alleles. So it depends on how many you get for black and how many you get for light. So yes, it works, but it's a compromise with a series. Any more questions?
Oh, yes. What happens if someone has one brown eye and the other is blue?
Something's gone wrong when the fertilization.
Okay.
It hasn't affected their eyesight, but it's just gone wrong only on eye color, not on eye function.
Are each of the matched pair of chromosomes identical?
They are identical in size and shape, but obviously if it's for brown eyes, it's not going to be identical to the one for blue eyes, but they're going to match completely in size and shape. But they'd be for different parts, different sorts of that attribute.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yvonne says she's a twin and is right-handed, but her sister is left-handed. So how does that work?
It works very easily because they are not identical twins. They are fraternal twins. So when the sperm fertilized the egg, making her, it was a left-handed. The gene for handedness was left. When the other twin was made, the sperm and the egg were for right-handedness. Right-handedness is dominant. So Yvonne's twin is carrying a recessive gene for left-handedness. I've got a grandson who's left-handed, and it was a surprise until we looked and found that 3 out of the 4 grandparents were left-handed. I'm the only right-handed grandparent. So there's recessives in the family, and my little grandson's is left-handed. And that's what's happened. No, if they were identical twins, it wouldn't be possible because it's one sperm and one egg, which then splits. But they are not identical twins. So it's just sperm and egg are different.
Thank you.
Okay, Yvonne?
Yeah. Why do scientists only analyse one chromosome in the pair?
I don't know. And I wish they'd stop it.
In terms of evolution and natural selection, what is the benefit of being a haploid drone? I suspect you're going to come on to that.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I am going to come on to it. Okay.
Right. And the only other thing is, Ian had missed the beginning. We are going to send the handout out to everyone who's booked on this one. So don't take notes, just pay attention.
And it's all, I've written it in great detail in the handout. Everything I'm saying is in the handout, apart from the pictures. Okay.
Right. That's it for questions for now. We'll let you carry on. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So drones have no father. They've only got one set of chromosomes. It's from their mother. They've got half the number of chromosomes that the females have got. They are haploid. The females have got double the number. They are diploid, right? And haploid males are characteristic of the order Hymenoptera. Ants are the same. Haploid males are characteristic of the order Hymenoptera. Right. Now let's go on to sex. In humans, the sex of your child and your sex is determined by a single pair of alleles. It's dead simple. One allelic pair. Every female that's listening to me tonight, all your mothers and daughters, are females, have got 2 X chromosomes. There's no arguments about that. There's only 2 of them. And to be a female, you've got to have 2 X's. Males have an X and a Y. And actually, it's an X with a bit missing. It's written as a Y, but it's actually an X with one of its legs missing. Males are an X and a Y. So if you carry a Y chromosome, you're a boy. If you carry 2 X's, you're a girl. And this is the problem Henry VIII didn't grasp. He kept blaming his wives for not having sons. And actually, it was entirely his fault. Because every wife he had 2 X's. Now, I've got 2 X chromosomes. So when I make eggs for mating, each egg can only carry an X chromosome. When a man makes sperm for mating, half of his sperm will have an X chromosome, and the other half will have a Y chromosome. So in humans, women determine how many babies they'll have because they can produce more than 1 egg, but every egg will have an X chromosome. Males, half the sperm will be X and half will be Y. It's the males that determine whether it's a boy or a girl, because the males carry the X chromosome. So the little girl in that picture is XX. The little boy in that picture is XY. When they grow up, every single egg she produces, and the interesting thing is, all those eggs that she will ever produce are there when she's born, and every one of them carries an X chromosome. The little boy, half his sperm, when he grows up, will be X, the other half will be Y. So when he has children, he will determine whether they have boys or girls. He hasn't got any choice in the matter. He doesn't know this, but that's what's biologically happening. No. Every egg will carry an X, and every sperm will either carry an X or a Y. The Y sperm gives the boy, there he is, and the X sperm gives the girl. There she is. Now, let's come on to some more difficult definitions. If two genes for any particular characteristic are the same, we say they're homozygous. And it's the same root of the word as in homosexual, homophobic. All of that terminology is from the Greek homo, meaning the same. So if you've got two genes the same as I have, I've got two X's for my sex chromosomes. So as Anne, Diane, Lee, all the women listening to me are homozygous for their sex chromosomes. Both of them are the same. If the two genes for the characteristic are different, as in every man listening to me and all the husbands and sons, brothers, they are all heterozygous, as in heterosexual, meaning the genes are the same. Sorry, the genes are different. An X and a Y, they're different, they're hetero. And we talk about homosexuals and heterosexuals, and it's just the Greek root of the word, meaning different or the same. So girls are homozygous for the sex chromosome, XX, and the boys are heterozygous, XY. I'm only telling you this because it's important for bees. Male honeybees only have one set, the set that they get from the queen. They've only got the one set, so they're hemizygous. Hemi meaning half, as in hemisphere, half. So male honeybees, drones, are hemizygous. But honeybees are different from us. Unfortunately, honeybees are different. We have one allelic pair of sex-determining genes, XX or XY, two of them. It's an allelic pair, and neither one nor the other is dominant. Two X's give a female, XY gives a male, one allelic pair. There it is. But instead of an allelic pair determining sex, they have an allelic series, a whole lot of genes, an allelic series. Now, there's up to 18. There could be 20, could be 24. I think they've found about 18 so far, but it depends. The 18 that you have around the Manchester area for your bees will be completely different to the 18 that you have in London. Some of them will be the same, but there could be 24 in total. So there's up to 18, and we're going to talk about them now, which determine sex. They're called complementary sex-determining genes, and we call them CSD alleles. And if you read the books about genetics and bees, they'll talk about CSD alleles. And all it means is these 18 or so genes that determine sex in bees. Right. Each female bee, queens and workers, has got any two of them, any two from the 18. I'm saying there's 18, so just believe me for tonight. Every one of our female bees, queens and workers, has got any two of them. And this is the key. They have to be a different two. Okay, you have to remember that. It's in the handout. So there's my queen. She's got a beautiful coat round her, and I've marked her. But I've also killed her and analysed her, and she's got genes 7. she's got sex-determining gene 9 and sex-determining gene 7. She's got 2, one from the drone, one from her mother queen. They're different, so she's female. She's my queen. Okay, now I can bring her back to life again and send her out to mate. And every egg that she produces has either got sex-determining gene 7 or sex-determining gene 9. She has no choice. She's only carrying those 2 sex-determining genes, those 2 alleles. She's got 2, so she's female. They've got to be 2 of them, and they're different. So she's a female. So she's come back to life. She's gone out mating. She's got gene 7, eggs that make gene 7 and gene 9. Now, they're produced in more or less equal numbers. Remember, they're just eggs. It's just their eggs. They've yet to be fertilized. Okay, so she's on her mating flight. Every egg she produces will have one or other of those 2. But the drones come from unfertilized eggs. So every drone that's in your colony, every drone in every one of our colonies has only got one or other of your queen's sex-determining gene. Every drone in my colony has either got a 7 or a 9 because they're not fertilized. They come from unfertilized eggs. So in my colony, half of the drones in this colony have got a 9, sex-determining gene 9, and the other half have got sex-determining gene 7, half each about. Okay, they haven't got the matching one from their dad because they haven't got a dad. So the queen flies to the drone congregation area to mate. There'll be about 20,000 drones there on a good day in the summer. About 200 colonies around the area. She opens her bursa copulatrix as she flies through the area, and she mates about every 15 seconds. Every 15 seconds, a drone falls back and dies. Say she mates with about 15 drones, and then she goes home, tired. All that sperm will migrate to her spermatheca. There it is, mating. She's mating. So my queen, remember, she's got 2 sex-determining genes, a 7 and a 9. She's mating with 15 drones, and it's these complementary sex-determining alleles or genes. This is the reason that our queens multiply mate, and this is the reason why they open mate in the air. So my queen, she's gone off, she's mated, and I'm just giving you, for example, 12 sex-determining genes. 12 in my little local area here with my bees are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 12 of them in the area where my queen's been to the drone congregation area and mated. So here's let's say my queen has a 7 gene and a 9 gene from this series, because there's only 1 to 12 in my area. And I've analysed it in my queen. I know she's got a 7 and a 9. She's got 2. They're different, so she's female. Every egg is either a 7 or a 9. And she's gone and mated. She's a lovely queen. She can produce eggs which carry either a 7 gene or a 9 gene. So she's only been out one day because it rained the rest of the time. She's mated with drones that they've only got 1 each, remember. So the first drone was carrying sex-determining gene 5. The second drone was carrying sex-determining gene 8. Third one 9. Fourth one 10. The fifth one was carrying sex-determining gene 1. And the last one that she mated with that day was carrying sex-determining gene 7. She didn't go out again because it poured with rain. She was not very well mated, but she mated with these 6 drones. 5, 8, 9, 10, 1, and 7. So all that sperm's in her spermatheca. There it is. Gets a nice little net over it once it's got sperm in it. Now, if she produces a 7, an egg with a 7 gene, it's unfertilized, no problem. She's got a drone. Remember, half of her drones will be 7. The other half have to be a 9 because she's only carrying a 7 and a 9. So the first egg she lays is unfertilized. not likely to happen, but in my colony, this colony, it did. If egg 7 is unfertilized, it produces a drone. If egg 9 is unfertilized, it will also produce a drone, because every drone that she produces has to have a 7 or a 9. Every unfertilized egg has to have a 7 or a 9. So every egg, 7 or a 9. Now, she's got all this sperm in her spermatheca. It's been nourished by the spermathecal fluid, and it'll be there for as long as she lives. Equal numbers of all of them. The rest gets chucked out. If egg 7 is fertilized by sperm 8, it'll be female. If egg 7 is fertilized by sperm number 5, it'll be female. Remember, they've got to be 2 and they've got to be different. If egg 7 is fertilized by sperm 9, it'll be female. Remember, in order to be female, it has to be diploid, i.e. double, 2 of them, and the 2 sex genes have to be different. But what happens if egg 7 is fertilized by that drone sperm 7? We get a diploid individual. They've got 2 lots, 7 from the mother and 7 from the father. And it ought to be female. But because the sex genes are the same, it can't be female. And it's almost as if those 2 7s are interpreted as a single 7, and we get a drone. But it's a diploid drone. This is where diploid drones come from. They've got double the number. It's not an unfertilized egg. It's fertilized. But it's fertilized by a drone sperm with the same sex allele as the queen, 2 7s. So you've got a diploid drone. They give off the wrong pheromones and they're eaten by the workers. But they have been reared in laboratories, and they are great big bulky blokes. Not much use, but big bulky blokes, as if they're on steroids. But they're eaten immediately because they give off the wrong pheromone. And of course, what happens when the workers eat the eggs is that there's a space. The whole sheet of eggs, you get pepper pot brood. There it is. All of those spaces are simply because the queen mated with some drones which had the same sex alleles as her, a 7 or a 9. Every time a 7 egg was fertilized by a drone sperm number 7, you get a diploid individual. But they're not different, they're the same. So it's a diploid drone and it gets eaten. The same if her egg, the other egg, number 9, is fertilized by a drone whose sperm is number 9, 2, diploid, double, but they're not different, so it's treated as if it's something wrong with it. It gives off the wrong pheromones, they eat it, and you can see that is the result in breeding. This is what you get when you line breed. You use this queen, and then you use her daughter queen, and her daughter queen, and her daughter queen in the same little area, particularly if she's mating with related drones, cousin drones, or her brother drones, or if her sister. If you give one queen to your mate, and she produces drones, then you're going to get inbreeding. Line breeding can lead to inbreeding. Now, they rear black bees a lot in Ireland, but because to avoid inbreeding, they send queens to each other across the country. They're all black bees, they're all Irish black bees, but they need different sex alleles. They don't want diploid drones, they don't want inbreeding because the colony will not last. So it's important the queens don't mate with their sons or their brothers, because they'll almost certainly have the same sex-determining genes. And breeding for a particular trait, like black bees or anything, not docility or hygienic behaviour so much, because that's a whole series of genes. But people who breed for particularly black bees or carniolans or buckfasts, you'll get inbreeding if you're not careful. And that's why, because those sex alleles, sex-determining genes, sex determining genes are the same. New stock needs to be brought in periodically. So if the queen mates with her brothers, then diploid drones could account for 50% of the brood, because her brothers will have the same alleles as her. I hope that makes sense. The colony wouldn't survive. Now, they've experimented with this. If you use instrumental insemination, you can get a queen and not allow her to mate. She will produce drones, obviously. She's a drone layer. And every one of the drones, in my case, would be a 7 or a 9. So they rear them in the lab. They rear the drones and they inseminate her with the drones. Say they one drone a 7. One drone's enough, actually. So they inseminate it with a 7. Every single one of them will be, well, 50% of the brood, obviously, would be diploid 7s, and the colony wouldn't survive because they wouldn't have enough workers to look after anything, you know, that was normal. Colony wouldn't survive. Diane, is that a good place to stop?
We have no questions at this point.
Good. I'll carry on. Either nobody understands it or everybody understands it, which is great. Right. Mutations usually occur in drones for an obvious reason. They've only got one lot of genes. So the mutation will show. That should say mutations only show in drones, because a worker could have a bad gene. They've got a good gene, which is dominant over the dud gene. So you could have workers in your colonies who've got carrying a mutation, but you'll never know, because they will also be carrying the dominant gene. If they weren't, the other workers would eat them as eggs, because they'd be giving off the wrong pheromone. But you will get the mutation showing in the drones. They tend to show, and they tend to get lost because the drones die. There's a white-eyed drone. He obviously can't see. He's got no pigment in his eyes. He won't be able to see. He has now. You might have workers there that are carrying that, because obviously the queen was carrying it, or else he couldn't have it. He must have 2 recessives, one from the queen and one from whichever drone she mated with, right? Now, if you get one white-eyed gene in your colony, the chances are you'll get more, because that queen is carrying the recessive gene. It's not showing, but one of the drones she mated with must have that recessive gene. And every single sperm he produces will have the recessive gene. Right? So the queen must have it, and she's passed it on to the drone. She's passed it on to this drone, white-eyed drones. You will never get them in workers. Right. So I'm going to talk about something completely different now. Patrilines. And this is fairly new in the syllabuses. So if you're doing any exams, I think this is module 7. I think it's in the syllabus. Right. Now, each drone that the queen mates with will have his sperm stored in her spermatheca. So each drone that she mates with has got his own set of daughters. 15 drones she mates with. Just let me have a drink. Sorry. She mates with 15 drones. There's 15 different dads in that colony. So your workers in your colony are divided into 15 different sets. And each set's got a different dad. And each set of daughters is called a patriline. Patri being a Latin root for father, as in paternal. Patriline is a set of daughters with a single dad. 15 dads, 15 drones she mated with. Each distinct set of daughters is called a patriline. And each patriline in the colony will have different strengths. Some of them will be really good guards. Some of them will be useless guarding. But some of them will be good at foraging. Some of them will be good water collectors. That'll be a whole patriline that are good at water collecting. And 1 or 2 of those patrilines will be defensive. In fact, you only need one patriline, one dad, one set of daughters to be defensive. And you think you've got a defensive colony. Because when you take your crown board off, they all come up and meet you and start to sting you, and you think, blimey, this colony is really bad. It's not. 90% of them are fine. You don't notice them because the other lot's stinging you. So, and that's a patriline. So, some of the workers in that colony will have the same drone father. One patriline have all got the same dad. And we call them super sisters because they've got the same father and the same mother. They're super sisters. If their drone fathers were brothers, i.e. out of the same queen, in other colony, obviously, if their fathers were brother drones, like they came from the same queen, we say they're ordinary sisters, they're sisters. They've got the same mum, the queen, and their dads were brothers, right? In our world, they'd be cousins, but in the bee world, they're sisters. Now, if the drone fathers are completely different colonies, completely unrelated, we say they're half sisters. So in any one colony, you've got, say, she mates with 15 drones, you've got 15 patrilines, 15 dads. Same dad, super sisters. Dad's brothers, they're sisters. Dad's totally unrelated, they're half sisters. Now, in every single colony, you'll never know it, but a small number of workers will be laying eggs. Every colony, you've got a small number of workers laying eggs. Now, if you're my half sister, your genes are only distantly related to me. And I certainly don't want your eggs or your bees or your genes because you're not related to me. Well, you are by the mother, by the queen. But your dad is no related to my dad at all. And I don't want your genes in my colony. So I'll eat them. I will eat any eggs that you lay because you're my half sister. I don't want your genes. I only want genes that are closely related to me. This is the selfish gene. So I eat them, and that's worker policing. If you're my super sister, however, it's a different matter altogether. If we've got the same dad, and obviously we've got the same mum, the queen, if we're super sisters, then we're very closely related. And I'm very happy to have your eggs in my colony, and I am not going to eat them. I leave them alone as if they were my own eggs. But another unrelated worker will come along and eat them. One of my half sisters is going to eat my eggs. Happens all the time. And that is worker policing. Right? Honeybee genetics are a lot more complicated than ours. And this is why they practice polyandry. Right? Poly meaning lots of, andry is Greek for male. And it's, you also get it in botany. So polyandry it's the opposite of a man having lots of wives. This queen has got lots of drones, and that's why they do it. It's partly to avoid diploid drones. It's partly because they need the services of lots of different patrilines, all of whom are better at different things. And it's also because worker policing, where we eat each other's eggs, mean that the only eggs that survive are the queen's eggs. Because every bee in that colony is more closely related to the queen than we are to our sisters and half sisters. I'm very closely related to my super sisters, great. And we're all good at going to get pollen, let us say. But if us lot lay eggs, somebody else is going to eat them. That's why we have a queen, and that's why only her eggs survive, because every bee is more closely related to her than to their sisters or half sisters. Andry is male, poly is many. They do it, they have polyandry to ensure that the pool of sex-determining genes, the CSD genes, complementary sex-determining genes, are as wide as possible. We need a big pool of those genes to make sure that we only produce females that have got 2 and that they're always different. She's got to mate with males that are totally unrelated, which is why the drones from your colony will fly to a completely different drone congregation area than the one that the queens go to. How they know which one to go to, I don't know. But your drones will go to a different one than your queen. They don't want the queen to mate with the brothers, and they know this instinctively. So the queen is the mother of every bee in that colony. And every bee in the colony is more closely related to her than they are to each other, except the super sisters. Keep it in your mind that super sisters are different. So it's in my interests to look after the queen's offspring than it is. It's no good me trying to lay my own eggs because somebody else is going to eat them. It's in everybody's interest to look after the queen's offspring because all of us are more closely related to her than we are to each other. It's not in your genetic interest to look after the offspring of another worker. I am not going to look after the offspring of my half-sister or my sister because those genes are not like my genes. The closest relative in that colony, apart from my super sisters, is the queen. And to be honest, it's no good our super sisters laying eggs because there's some unrelated worker's going to eat them. And because of the complicated genetics, we get polyandry and we get worker policing.
Should we have a few questions?
Yeah, let me say that this is our latest special issue. You can see the date at the bottom is February this year. It's £7 from the BBKA web shop, but I have to tell you, it is in much greater detail. Everything I've said, but it's also much greater detail. You don't need all of it, but at least half of it is very, very relevant. You're interested in the rest of it, that's great. But it's more advanced than the beekeepers need, but it's very good. And you can get it £7 from the BBKA website. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Buckfasts are hybrids of different bees. If they are, why does breeding them lead to diploid drones?
Well, the trouble is buckfasts are actually mongrels. But if you get a buckfast queen, and there are some areas in this country where everybody has got buckfast and they get them from Denmark. Now, it's all very well if you all buy from different people. But that breeder in Denmark is sending queens over, and they're going to be all related, and they're all going to be producing drones that are related. So you could get diploid drones. If they are totally unrelated, it's no different to anybody else. I mean, if I've got black bees and you've got carniolans or buckfasts, they can mate, no problem, no problem. And if buckfasts are different strains, i.e. they've been produced from different sorts of bee, then it's no problem. You won't get diploid drones. It's just the same as anybody else, though. But they are mongrels. They're not a strain of bee.
If the drone is white-eyed genetically and therefore phenotypically, how does he manage to mate with the queen if he's blind?
He doesn't. He dies. It is the queen that is carrying the recessive gene. And she has obviously got that genetic gene either from her mother or her father. But he can't see and he will die. He can't pass the recessive gene on. It is the queen that is passing it on.
Approximately what percentage of workers will be egg layers in a normal colony?
Well, I would say 0.1%, 0.2%. But if you think in the summer you've got about 60,000, it goes on, but you'll never know about it because as soon as it's laid, somebody unrelated to you is going to eat it.
Does the sperm come out in batches, as in a series from one drone, or all mixed up randomly?
All mixed up. It's more or less in equal proportions. I mean, if she mates with about 15 drones or 18 drones or something, she's got about 90 million sperm. She only needs about 7 million. She can only hold about 7 or 4, between 4 and 7 million. The rest of it she excretes, she's lost. But it's in about more or less equal numbers in the spermatheca. And it comes out completely randomly. as indeed does the X and the Y in the male sperm. It's completely random. But over the course of her life, it's going to come out more or less in equal amounts for each drone.
Lisa asks, how regularly should she requeen from an outside queen? She has 4 hives close together.
Well, she doesn't need to. It depends what all her neighbours have got. Because the chances are her queen is flying to a congregation area. I mean, where is Lisa from?
She doesn't
No,
say.
She's from London. Okay. If she's in the middle of nowhere in the north of Scotland or in the wilds of Wales somewhere, then yes, she will need to requeen from an outside queen, because the chances are there aren't many beekeepers in the area. But if you're an urban beekeeper or even semi-rural beekeeper, I mean, I live in a tiny little village and there are 5 beekeepers in my village, all got their bees from different areas. So I don't need to bother about, I will requeen, but not for that reason. I will requeen because I don't want to run out of sperm or pheromones. But I'm not worried about inbreeding, because there's 5, you know, at least 5 in my village, and God knows how many in Oxfordshire that she's flying to. And they're flying to different places, you know, different congregation areas. So you don't need to worry about it unless you're a solitary beekeeper, an isolated beekeeper, I mean.
Thank you. John says he is told that the daughters or granddaughters of Italian or Buckfast bees can become nasty. Why would that be?
Yes, not Italian. Well, it depends, because Buckfast in particular are a hybrid. They're a mongrel bee. If they mate with, you have to buy a new Buckfast queen every year, because if they mate with a local drone from a local queen, their genes will be completely mixed up and they are likely to be aggressive. It's not guaranteed, but it's likely. The Buckfasts in the second year, the daughter will produce defensive bees. Italians are different. Italians are so docile. I mean, they don't particularly like our winters, but if Italians mate with Italians, they're fine. It's when Italians mate with Carniolans or black bees or Buckfasts that the bees just get all mixed up and they get defensive, yes.
So what can we do to get rid of this nasty trait that some bees have?
Have local bees. Breed local bees to the local area. And if you've got a very defensive colony, people say to me, I'll requeen it. But if you think about it, if she mates with 15 drones and one of those drones was carrying a gene for defensiveness, and the queen had a gene for defensiveness, you're going to get 1/15 of your worker bees will be defensive, but you won't notice the rest of them. You'll only notice the ones that come up and get you. And you could requeen, but don't forget, it is some of those genes that will be carried in the drone. If the queen has got a gene for defensiveness, half of her drones will be carrying it. So your neighbours won't like you unless you fork out your drone brood. If you've got a defensive colony, yes, requeen it by all means. But early in the season, before those drones are flying, fork out all your drone brood. You do not want your drones mating with all your neighbours' bees. So do both of those. Definitely requeen, fork out the drone brood, because the drones are carrying it. Some of them anyway.
Thank you. When you replace, yes, just a couple more. When you replace a queen, what stops the worker bees from not destroying her eggs as they're not related to her?
They haven't got any choice, have they? The only way that colony, if they are queenless, that colony will not survive. Because you'll get, after all the brood's gone, the brood pheromones have gone, you will get laying workers, without a doubt. That colony will then die out. And there'll be so many of them laying that they won't do worker policing, because they're all laying eggs. They won't know whose eggs are which. So that colony will die out. But if you requeen it, they've got a chance of carrying on. And that's why they'll accept a new queen, particularly a new queen of the same strain. You know, if you replace if you've got Italian bees and you put a black queen in there, they'll kill it. You put an Italian queen in a black bee colony, they'll kill it. Because totally unrelated. But if you get a queen from your neighbour or you rear your own queen and put that queen in, then some of the genes will be the same. And they'll accept it. Apart from the fact they've got no choice. But only I went to see a beekeeper last year who told me that they replaced their queen and they put the queen in queen cage and it was all going to be fine. They put a virgin in the queen cage. And I said, it's going to die. And they couldn't understand why. Because it wasn't mated. You can't put it in a cage and introduce it until it's mated. And this beekeeper had been keeping bees for 25 years. So only mated queens get introduced in queen cages. You can run a virgin in and you might be lucky, but it's much easier to run a virgin into a small nuke and get her to mate. Any more questions?
We'll just do one or two more, I think. Can you explain meiosis in drones in the simplest terms?
Meiosis, yes. Well, meiosis is when and it happens to all of us. When I produce eggs, or when I did when I was younger, produce eggs, then my eggs have to have half the chromosome number. They have to have N and not 2N. And similarly, a man's sperm, remember, 2N in every cell in your body. But when you're producing eggs and sperm, it's got to halve. It can only go forward as an egg or a sperm with N. Because half of it comes from your mother and half from your father. And if they didn't have half the chromosome number, every next generation would have double. Does that make sense? Now, what happens in me, when I'm producing eggs, or when I did, chromosomes just split and half go one way and half go the other way. So every egg has got half the chromosome number. Right? Every egg and every sperm is hemizygous. But it can't happen in drones because they're only hemizygous to start with. But it does happen. So as the sperm comes down the tubes in the drone, they divide into two. But then because they're only half to start with, they rejoin again before the sperm comes out. And that's what happens in drones. Doesn't happen in the queen, but it happens in drones. Queens go through the full meiosis and produce a full egg. As do the workers, of course, if they're laying eggs, but you know, it doesn't work in the drones. It does, but it stops and they recombine. Anybody else?
I think we'll just do one more. What's the true definition of a buckfast bee from a genetic point of view?
It's no different from a genetic point of view. It's genome. It's still got N is a 16. It's the same, but it's being produced over many generations of bees from, Brother Adam did it from dozens of different sorts of bee. And now they're still, I don't know why they call them buckfast, because they do it in Denmark. And they say they've got some of those buckfast bees from the Abbey originally, and they're inbreeding them all the time. Or they are producing them from Cardiolans, and some of them were Greek and some of them were Macedonian and things like that. So it's a mongrel. Genetically, it's a complete mongrel, rather like you and me.
Right, thank you. There are one or two more questions, but I think one's a bit complicated for reading out. So if I sent them to you, perhaps you can reply to people directly, if that would be all right.
Yeah, no problem.
Right.
I understand them, and if I can answer them, okay.
Okay.
I will email you. Will you the handout? Or should I
yes,
send it
thank
to
you. No, send it to me. I'll email them out in the next quarter of an hour or something if you send it over.
Well,
so,
thank you very much, folks, for listening. I hope you understood it. I hope you didn't take notes, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margaret. That's absolutely excellent. There's such positive feedback in the chat. So thank you.
Good. I hope some of you are doing module 7.
I think there are quite a few people doing module 7. So let's hope the results show good results for that.
Yeah, it's difficult difficult module, but that, I mean, I didn't do mitosis or meiosis. That's a different lecture, which I'd have to write, and I might do that. Okay, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.